I really think the RDL is being underutilized. I think people see the RDL as an accessory where it's actually a primary strength exercise. It's no different than a conventional deadlift or a deficit deadlift, a sumo deadlift. It's just another variation, right? It's a Romanian deadlift, RDL. The biggest difference is the RDL, the bar starts at the top. It doesn't start at the bottom. And when you lower the weight, it never touches the ground. All the other deadlift variations, obviously they start on the ground. So it's unique that you start at the top and it's going to utilize a stretch shortening cycle a lot more. There's a transition from the eccentric phase to the concentric phase. And that's a big reason I've always believed that the RDL, you should RDL as much or more than your deadlift. The reason people don't do that is because they see the exercise as an accessory or they see it as a hamstring exercise. It's not a hamstring exercise. A leg curl is a hamstring exercise. If I've got a barbell in my hand, right, and I'm gonna do a hinge, a compound exercise to me isn't the best selection to isolate a muscle. So you gotta erase the idea that it's for hamstrings. It's for any muscle involved in the hinge, which hamstrings, glutes, back, all the way up. It's a complete posterior chain strengthening exercise. So that's the mindset. It's not a hamstring exercise. I want to have a 1 rep max, a 2 rep max, a 3 rep max. I want to train it just like my deadlift. And we know there's benefits in training variations of lifts. So it's just going to give you another element to find and improve on weaknesses in your deadlift. Like I said, the weight doesn't touch the ground. You start at the top. Now, I've been in situations where I've had to pick the weight up. That's not ideal. So ideally, you've got it in a rack. You unrack the bar, and most people take a step back, which is fine. I actually have a method where you unrack the bar without ever moving your feet, which is ideal, especially when you get up 500, 600, 700 pound range with RDL, which I've done it. And it's one of the best ways to lift heavy is to unrack without moving your feet. That's for another video. So some common mistakes I see. People RDL, their feet are too wide. I like to have my feet a little bit closer and I like my toes out. Like I said, because I'm not just using hamstrings, I want to use hips. So do this, stand up, put your toes straight, and then try to squeeze your glutes together as hard as you can, like you're pinching a walnut. Okay, now take your toes slightly outside, and now do that same thing and tell me which one could you contract the hardest. And I know the answer is with your toes out. So when I RDL and I want to use my hips, those are my strongest muscle, I want access to that muscle. So I'm gonna externally rotate my toes. The other thing it does is a lot of people, have issue with the hinge in itself. This allows your knees, I have a little bit, so if your toes are externally rotated, I want my knees externally rotated. I'm gonna do that from the start. See this motion right here. So straight toes, I want that tension. I want to pretend like I'm trying to spread or tear paper that's on the floor. I'm gonna tear the floor apart. That's gonna give me great access to the hips. The other thing it does is when I go down, my knees can travel apart and I can really access the hips. It's gonna eliminate a lot of the injury that you think you're exposing yourself to when you bend over. Instead of having it in the low back, this pattern, this diamond pattern, I like to see it as a diamond, keeps it in the hips. So that's how I know I'm safe. When I've got 600, 700 pounds and I'm gonna bend over all the way, I feel safe because I know I've got all the tension in the right places. And a key to doing that is knees have to come out. So when the bar travels down, I want my knees to open, right? And then when I stand up, they might come back closer together as I contract and squeeze my hips. I don't see a lot of people doing that. I see a lot of straightforward and they're bending over like they're touching their toes. And stretch and tension are two different things, especially when you've got a barbell in your hand. And generally, the general rule is whatever muscle has the tension or wherever you feel the tension, that's the muscle that's gonna contract. So if you're going on the eccentric portion and you feel the tension in the low back, you know that you're wrong. So number one, change your feet, open the toes, open the knees. But that's actually not even the most important part. The most important part is the hips. So you've got to learn how to do an anterior pelvic tilt. You want the hips, if your hips are a bowl of milk, you want your hips to tilt forward, spill the milk forward. Bowl of cereal, picture your hips, and then you just want to spill the milk forward. You've got to learn to do that. So once you do that, that's when you get that access to those bigger, stronger muscles, and it's key to keeping those shear forces out of the low back. A couple exercises, I know people do the dowel behind the back. That's great if it helps you. I'm not a crazy fan, and I'm not gonna get on camera and do this, but if you know what cat camel is, cat camel, right? Camel, you've got your hands and knees, you got a big arch in the back. That is a posterior pelvic tilt. That's exactly what you don't wanna do. And then if you move into the cat position, you got the chest up, you got that arched back. That is an example of an anterior pelvic tilt, and that's what you want. So what that does is it allows you to feel the difference in your hips, right? You can go into an anterior pelvic tilt without this exaggerated extension, because as many of you might have seen, I'm not a fan of extension, especially in the thoracic, especially when you're lifting near max or max weight. So once you figure that out, then all you have to do is be honest with yourself. I see a lot of people, when they start the RDL, they change the pattern. That would be mistake number one. You don't want to cheat this exercise. You want to do it with as much integrity as any other exercise. So rule number one is the weights should come as close to the ground as possible without touching, right? That doesn't mean leave this much space or whatever. And people will say, well, it depends on the person. I would say it does not depend on the person. You should be able to self-organize and figure out how to get as close to the ground as possible and then turn the weight around. That's the whole reason you're doing the exercise, is to turn the weight around, and you want to do it throughout as great range of motion as you can. So I've seen people stand on plates. They say they're too flexible. That's not what this exercise is about. You decide when to turn the weight around, and you want to turn it around before it touches the ground. It's as simple as that. Other tips and tricks, you want to, like I said, we're treating the RDL just like any other strength exercise. So a lot of times people will just nice and slow, right? You want to learn how to drop it down and then come back up. Like any other exercise, like a squat, like a bench press, there are advanced techniques that can be learned on the RDL just like the other exercises. And speed eccentrics in your warm-up are great, learning how to turn off and turn on those muscles. I think it increases proficiency, and it ultimately is going to help you produce more force. So take these tips and tricks. Don't be afraid of the RDL. The RDL is not an accessory exercise. It is a primary strength exercise. It should be trained as such. So me personally, I do my RDLs after a squat. I'm going to front squat today with low rep sets, and then I'm going to do RDLs for low rep sets. And I'll probably work up towards the 500-600 range for 5 to 8 sets of 3. That's what I'm going to do. And then depending on how I feel, I go for a single, I go for a triple, whatever. But start training your RDL just like any other strength exercise. Reevaluate where your feet at, what your knees do, and add this to your training. I think it's going to be most people, when they start training this in this manner with the RDL, they start to see PRs really fast, and they start to realize this is an exercise I should have been doing about 10 years ago. So give it a try. Let me know how you think.